SCO Foreign Ministers Summit or Council meeting, the CFM, Council of Foreign Ministers. Now, India is all set to host the SCO Summit later this year on the 3rd and 4th of July in New Delhi. But before that, this meeting is doing bulk of the groundwork. The foreign ministers are setting the tone, the pitch, and of course the agenda for the heads of state to meet and speak. So 3rd and 4th of July, we'd have Xi Jinping in Delhi, Shahbaz Sharif in Delhi, Vladimir Putin in Delhi, if all goes according to plan and India's chair and leadership is able enough to keep the conflict aside and focus on cooperation. So there are it's a 15-point agenda that has been largely worked on. Most of the foreign ministers who have come in today, they have all focused on three aspects: peace, trade, and economic cooperation. So this is going to be perhaps most important, where everybody would want to have a cooperative future going forward. Even Bilawal Bhutto saying the same thing. The Pakistanis very clearly wanting to show that they are a responsible SCO member. They want to put aside the kind of behavior that has been displayed in the past. They want to steer clear of bilateral issues and hold the line of cooperation. Now, will that veer towards conflict and towards rabble-rousing in the next over the course of the next 24 hours? We'll have to wait and watch. But the overall multilateral fora gets underway on Friday morning. Now, what is India going to lead? India is going to focus on traditional medicine, innovation and startup. It will also try and bring out the regional and global issues where the larger blueprint of cooperation has to be established. And, of course, reforming the SCO. What needs to be done to not just make it a nimble, agile and current organization rather than something which has been done in the past. So these are aspects which are important, which will be focused on at this point. We will also I think India is also, I'm just going to quickly get Abhishek Jha to join us to get us the latest updates. The bilaterals are getting over. We are getting pictures of Bilawal completing his meeting with Sergei Lavrov. Abhishek is with us. Abhishek, there have been long engagements between India and Russia, longer engagements between Russia and China, Russia and Pakistan, and of course India and China. So all these engagements, these one-on-ones are happening back to back. So it's quite busy at Taj Exotica, the venue for this summit. You've been out there the whole day in the hot sun. So along with getting baked, have you also been able to get some inside stories as to what's cooking inside?
So clearly, Anand, Goa is probably the diplomatic capital of the world currently, because almost all major nations like Russia, China, India, Pakistan and Central Asian countries, their foreign ministers are here in India, and we have seen many bilaterals happening. External Affairs Minister S. Jaishankar had a meeting with the Chinese counterpart, Russian counterpart, and with Uzbeki counterpart as well. And at the same time, this venue, or this whole SCO grouping has also provided an opportunity where Russians have also met with the Chinese, and Chinese have met with the Pakistanis, and also Pakistani foreign minister has met with the Russian foreign minister Sergei Lavrov. Their meeting holds very significance, because we have seen in the recent times Russia has tried to explore other opportunity or other destinations for its export, when it has been practically being cut off to supply and export and generate revenue by selling natural gas and oil to European countries. So, and Pakistan's foreign minister Bilawal Bhutto was in Russia recently. So clearly an energy cooperation and engagement on the agenda. India has S. Jaishankar has met with the Chinese foreign minister, and they did talk about the issues regarding this border, how to resolve this as quickly as possible. This is just a meeting that the two sides have had in the last 2 months, because the last time in the month of February, when the Chinese foreign minister was in Delhi during G20 meeting, S. Jaishankar and King Yang had a meeting then also, and in the meanwhile, in between, there has been other level of engagement also at military level and senior diplomatic level, where both sides are trying to resolve the border issue. India has maintained that until this border issue is resolved, there cannot be any normalcy that can happen between the bilateral ties between India and China.
Right. There was a detailed statement that the India-Russia, post the India-Russia conversation that even the Russians put out, and it largely focused on greater cooperation and trying to keep the SCO nimble and continue to keep it evolving. Let's try and look at, even as Kaval Sibalji, Fred Ware and also Aina Tangin join us this evening, let's try and see how the spread of the SCO is actually increasing, the footprint, and it's now becoming multi-continental, if I could use that word, because the core member states, India, China, Russia, Pakistan, Tajikistan, Uzbekistan, Kazakhstan and Kyrgyzstan. But then we also have observer states who are now here, Afghanistan, Belarus, Iran and Mongolia. Then the dialogue partners, so the addition happens with the Eastern European states in Armenia, Azerbaijan. And then we have nations and entities in Asia and South Asia, which are Cambodia, Nepal, Sri Lanka and Turkey. The new additions which are likely are Kuwait, UAE, Myanmar and Maldives. The Myanmarese foreign minister had an engagement and a long chat even with the Chinese foreign minister Qin Gang before this development. Now we're given to understand UAE, Iran, Kuwait, Myanmar are some of the nations who may have, who will be getting invites to even come and join in at the summit level meeting in July. So more nations getting on board. What does this imply? What does this mean? The larger question, conflict or cooperation, what will the agenda be eventually? Kaval Sibalji, may I start with you? Namaste. Thank you very much.
You know, the real purpose behind SCO is to build multipolarity. And the Russian president has been very vocal about the need to build a more equitable and multipolar world, which is an objective that India also shares. Now, all the countries that you mentioned who are coming as dialogue partners or observers and other potential observers will enlarge the footprint of the SCO. And the important thing is that there is no Western country which is present in this grouping, and therefore whatever is discussed, whatever the agenda, this is not either in consultation or concertation or under the control of the West. So to that extent, yes, this is a building block for multipolarity. But on the other hand, the more the SCO expands, the more unwieldy it becomes, as we have seen in the case of the European Union. And though, of course, in their case, they belong to the same larger civilization, it'll become more difficult to handle SCO from within. Therefore, there has to be some very serious discussion about the criteria that should be used or agreed upon in order to accept an enlargement of the SCO in terms of its permanent membership. Like the G7 or the G20, where all sorts of countries are invited by the presidency of the moment, depending on its own geopolitical interests. The SCO presidency can also invite other countries to come and attend. But see, you mentioned that peace, trade, and whatever is the focus point. So the point is there's no peace between India and China. The two principal members along with Russia of the SCO. Right. There's no peace between India and Pakistan. There's no trade between India and Pakistan. There are problems in trade between India and China because India is trying to limit the access of certain of Chinese companies to certain sensitive sectors. There are huge problems of connectivity which we want to build. But Iran is under sanctions. To what extent we can do that without the sanctions coming in the way is also an issue. If Myanmar and others come in, this will, in fact, make the whole problem more problematic, issue more problematic. Let me just conclude by saying that Iran's permanent membership has delayed for the simple reason that the nuclear issue was there. And both China and Russia actually approved UN sanctions on Iran. But now that the whole geopolitical scene has completely changed, so there is no hesitation on the part of China and Russia now to include Iran as a permanent member. So let's say it's a good organization for India to be in. We are an Asian country. We have very large interests in this region. We have Nepal, Sri Lanka, and others who are actually, dialogue partners. So we can't afford to be absent from the region. Terrorism is a very big issue, and we are going to focus on that as we've done in all other meetings. And this is an issue which concerns Russians, which concerns the Chinese, concerns the Central Asian states. Though again here, the contradiction, because China actually shields Pakistan from pressure put by India in terms of terrorism directed from Pakistani soil against us. So these are all the issues within the SCO which to contend with to make it a useful, forward-looking, productive organization, frankly. And then finally, trade. Now we have an issue between India and Russia because of sanctions. The rupees are these are being accumulated. We can't pay in dollars. We are trying to find a way out. So these are the kind of issues we have to grapple with within the SCO.
Yeah, I think one of the aspects that stands out is, can we move towards a de-dollarization era where the trading mechanism can be sans the dollar amongst the nations who are part of the SCO. But like you said, almost every nation is in conflict with the other, and there are certain places or a large part of places where the way forward cannot happen till these conflict hurdles are removed. Fred Ware, thank you very much. Where does Russia stand right now in this current scene, scheme of things? Because Russia is bearing the brunt of almost all its actions today. Largely, President Putin's position has been to protect the Russian borders and to stop NATO from training its guns within range, with Moscow in range. That's the whole thought process behind this aggression with Ukraine. Not many buy this theory, but that's where Russia's thought process is. The engagement with China, engagement with India, and the importance of this region, this huge landmass that also accounts for at least 2/3 of the world's population. Can they actually work together?
Well, that's a difficult question. It's certainly true that the SCO has been a priority for Russia even long before it reached this confrontational stage with the West in 2014. A pivot toward Eurasia was a Russian priority even then. But since then, since the sanctions began, since the relationships deteriorated and now they just completely destroyed, especially with the United States, the SCO becomes far more significant to Russia as a place to bring its narrative, to develop its trading ties, develop geopolitical support, or at least neutrality. I think the Russians are satisfied with countries that sit on the fence as far as the Ukraine war is concerned. Right. And also to get around sanctions, because the sanctions are Russia is pretty resilient so far, but it needs to continue selling its hydrocarbons, needs to import certain necessary goods, and it needs the financial means to do that. That's where the de-dollarization effort comes in. It was again another thing that was there before, but has accelerated tremendously since this war began, and will continue to do so. So I think and for Russia, I mean, Latin America and Africa are important, but Eurasia is critical. And this organization, the SCO, is the vehicle that the Russians are concentrating on, and I think that I'm watching with considerable interest to see what does come out of this meeting and how they set up for the big summit that's to come.
Aina Tangen, where is China on this? China is in for the long game. It can play the patience game. But eventually, does China see that if it's identified America as the adversary and if it wants to beat Western hegemony, it can't pick up, it needs friends around it in Asia?
Well, I think it's a little bit more than that. Remember, the SCO goes back and was established way before things had intensified with the United States. It's really, from Beijing's point of view, it's the United States that is being the aggressor with security, patrols up and down the Taiwan coast, going into the South China Seas, not allowing technologies such as chips and chip-making equipment to be there, blacklisting Chinese companies. It goes on and on. So from Beijing's perspective, it's the U.S. that it's afraid of losing its hegemony. Now, in terms of the way that not only this group, SCO, but also BRICS, are evolving. It reflects this multipolar world my colleague was earlier talking about. It is emerging, and it has different areas. Now, in areas like the UN, where the traditional colonial powers dominate the Security Council, people feel a certain amount of frustration. Attempts to reform it have not been successful. And you're starting to see these regional organizations, or extra-regional in terms of BRICS, coming together, middle powers, bringing on other middle powers to, in essence, settle their own issues instead of, allowing the U.S. to push them around or tell them what they should be doing.
But in this era of multipolarity, does China now view India as an adversary, as something that it needs to eventually take over, or does it look at it as a friend and a partner? Because India is very clear, we cannot have conflict and then talk cooperation. Both won't happen simultaneously. So has China made a decision on that end?
No, I mean, in terms of, there's this desire on behalf of Delhi to define the relationship in terms of the border dispute. China does not see that as a particularly important issue from the perspective it's not strategic. I mean, this is not going to change anything. Goat pastures don't really make a difference. The amount of time and energy going in just doesn't seem to make a lot of sense. They would like to see India as part of a greater Asian rise. Obviously a heavily populated, a young population, perfect for the Belt and Road Initiative, for China to downstream industries which it can no longer be supported within China because of the higher wages, etc. So I think China would like to view India as a partner. That was what Xi Jinping said back in 2013, that China and Asia will determine the future of the world. I mean, China and India will determine the future of Asia and thereby the world. So at this juncture, I think it is, the question is, how do they resolve this issue? There's obviously domestic political concerns about who's blinking or who's giving this. I think it's at some juncture, statesmanship has to come in, and there's an opportunity on both sides, both Xi and Modi, to sit down and say, look, here's a realistic appraisal of this. We're going to do some land swaps. We're going to settle this issue. And then hopefully these two nations can better understand each other and go forward in a cooperative way.
Kamal Sibalji? Final word. I've got 60 seconds, so I'm giving that to you.
Very quickly. Firstly, China emphasizes sovereignty issues as the core of their foreign policy. So for India, it is sovereignty at play. So therefore, I don't buy this argument that India should not focus on its sovereignty, but should put it aside as a secondary issue. Number two, in terms of reform of the United Nations, China is a big bloc. Russia and all the other members support India's permanent membership. China does not, and China will not. Even in our BRICS meeting, they don't, the formulation you see skirts the issue of India's permanent membership and says that they welcome India's increasing role within the UN system. So, number three, we've had how many 22 rounds of the special representatives, 18 rounds of the military level talks. So the issues are known. So if it is as simple as saying that, look, withdraw to the positions that were occupied before this whole turmoil began, China can take the decision, but China simply refuses.
Right.
What are we saying? We are not demanding anything more from China. We are saying just go back to the position you were in before April 2020 or whatever the date was.
Correct.
But China is refusing to do that. And they say, no, let's decide. It's not a core issue because they want to now emerge as a peacemaker. That's what they're doing all over. And they want to draw attention away from this issue by trying to down. But for India, it is a very, very important issue because Chinese forces are massed there. They are killing Indian territory. They continue to claim so, make more and more
absolutely. So
renaming places in Arunachal Pradesh and all. So I think there's a lot of work to be done in good faith before we can arrive at any satisfactory conclusion.
No, very well said. And if you're looking at multipolarity, then, to try and take on one hegemonistic force, you cannot want to create another hegemonistic force and say, I'll become the hegemony and then you guys follow me. That tone and attitude itself is not going to work. There'll be other nations who will say, sorry, we're going to look beyond you too. There will come to a stage and there will be nations who would say, we're going to hedge our bets. Like you said very well, that this is an age of multipolarity. We will engage in a longer conversation on the sidelines of the SCO meet sometime tomorrow, very soon. I request all of you to please make time for the right stand tomorrow too, and our team will reach out to you. For the moment, thank you very much, Fred Ware, Anna Tangin, and also Kaval Sibalji. Thank you very, very much. We're going to take a very short break. Then, when we come back, we turn the spotlight towards pole-bound Karnataka. A very interesting conversation right in the heart of old Bengaluru at Sajjan Rao Circle with certain core members, hardcore Kannadigas, very passionate politicians.